good morning, or good afternoon, good evening. Whatever it is, it's good, isn't it? We're glad you're here today. We're going to be talking to you about all sorts of things on this fine program, Once Upon a Time, presented to you by Pocatello Community Media. I'm Catherine Poulter, the children's librarian.
And I'm Becca Hyde, and I am the early childhood librarian.
And we have so many good books. I found a wonderful book. This is called Emmanuel's Dream. It's the true story of Emmanuel Ofosu-Yeboah. And oh, what a good story this is. It was very inspiring. It's by Laurianne Thompson and Sean Qualls. I think you'll like it too. So that's what I'll start out with today. Here we go. Emmanuel's Dream. In Ghana, in West Africa, a baby boy was born. 2 bright eyes blinked in the light. 2 healthy lungs let out a powerful cry. 2 tiny fists opened and closed, but only 1 strong leg kicked. Most people thought he would be useless, or worse, a curse. His father left, never to return, but his mother had faith. Her name was Comfort, and she named her first child Emmanuel, meaning God is with us. As Emmanuel grew, Mama Comfort told him he could have anything, but he would have to get it for himself. He learned to crawl and hop, to fetch water and to climb coconut trees. He even shined shoes to earn money. Most kids with disabilities couldn't go to school. Still, Emmanuel's mother carried him there until one day she said, "You are too heavy." From then on, Emmanuel hopped to school and back, 2 miles each way on 1 leg by himself. At first, nobody would play with him, so Emmanuel saved his money and bought something none of his classmates had, a brand new soccer ball. Of course he would share it, if he could play too. Lunging and spinning on crutches his grandmother had found for him, and kicking the ball with his good left foot, Emmanuel earned their respect. His new friends sometimes used their lunch money to rent bikes. Would Emmanuel be able to join them? His friend Godwin pushed him fast so he could balance. Over and over again Emmanuel fell, hard, but finally he rode. When Emmanuel was 13, Mama Comfort got very sick. She could no longer sell vegetables at the market, and Emmanuel's sister and brother were too little to work. He would have to support them. Against his mother's wishes, Emmanuel snuck out and boarded a midnight train to the bustling city of Accra, 150 miles away, alone. He didn't know it then, but it would be 2 years before he saw his family again. Emmanuel arrived full of hope. There were so many people, but no one would hire him. Shopkeepers and restaurant owners told him to go out and beg, like other disabled people did. Emmanuel refused. Finally, a food stand owner offered him a job and a place to live. When Emmanuel wasn't serving drinks, he kept busy shining shoes. He earned money and sent it home. One morning when Emmanuel went to buy shoe shining supplies, the shopkeeper thought he was there to beg and scolded him. Insulted, Emmanuel slammed his money down on the counter. The shopkeeper apologized, but Emmanuel would never forget. When Mama Comfort grew sicker, Emmanuel went home to be with her. From her bed on Christmas Eve, she told her son, "Be respectful, take care of your family, don't ever beg, and don't give up." By the next morning, Emmanuel's beloved mother was dead. He was heartbroken, but he knew her last words had been a gift. He would honor them by showing everyone that being disabled is not being unable. It was a big dream, but Emmanuel had a plan. Emmanuel had a sharp mind, a bold heart, and one strong leg. All he needed was a bike. At first no one would help. They thought his plan to bicycle around Ghana was impossible. Then Emmanuel wrote to the Challenged Athletes Foundation, all the way in San Diego, California. They sent him a bike, plus a helmet, shorts, socks, and gloves. Emmanuel started training for the long ride. He persuaded the king of his region to give him a royal blessing. He went door to door asking for additional support. Finally, he hired a taxi to follow him, with drinking water, a camera, and his best friends. Then Emmanuel tied his right leg to the bike's frame, jammed his left foot into a flip-flop attached to the pedal, and rode. Emmanuel pedaled through the bustling city of Accra. He pedaled through rainforests, over rolling hills, and across wide muddy rivers. He pedaled past odum forests and plantain farms, and through the market city of Kumasi. He pedaled as trucks roared past on the narrow highways, and wild animals stalked his thoughts. He pedaled through vast grasslands and into the ancient city of Tamale. He rode up, down, across, and around his country, proudly wearing the colors of its flag on a shirt printed with the words, "The Pozo," or "The Disabled Person." Along the way, Emmanuel talked to those with physical challenges and those without, to poor farm workers and wealthy landowners, to religious leaders, government officials, and reporters. He wanted everyone to see him and his disability. He wanted everyone to hear him and his message. The farther Emmanuel rode, the more attention he got. Children cheered. Able-bodied adults ran or rode along with him. People with disabilities left their homes and came outside, some for the very first time. The young man once thought of as cursed was becoming a national hero. He completed his astounding journey, pedaling south to the sea and back to Accra, nearly 400 miles in just 10 days. But Emmanuel's success goes even further than that. He proved that one leg is enough to do great things, and one person is enough to change the world. And here's a quotation from him. He said, "In this world we are not perfect. We can only do our best." The end.
That's incredible.
A great story.
Thank you for reading that.
Yes.
And here's another remarkable person that we can read about. This is a new book written about Jane Austen. It is entitled Ordinary Extraordinary Jane Austen, and it's written by Deborah Hopkinson and illustrated by Gwyn Lang. And here we go. It is a truth universally acknowledged that Jane Austen is one of our greatest writers. But it might surprise you to know that Jane lived a simple life. She wasn't rich or even very famous in her time. In fact, if you had met Jane when she was a girl, you might not have noticed her at all. She was sometimes awkward and a little shy, especially when company arrived. But even then, clever Jane was always watching, listening, and smiling to herself at the foolish things people sometimes said and did. Jane had plenty of people to observe. Right in her own home, Jane and her sister Cassandra were the only girls in a house bustling with boisterous brothers, 6 of them, plus packs of boys who came to live and study at their father's boarding school. It was like growing up inside a story full of fascinating and noisy characters. Maybe you can zoom right in on that picture. Great, thank you. Families back then made their own fun, and the Austens were never bored. They played word games, cards, and charades. Jane was especially good at shuttlecock and cup and a ball. I don't know that game. Of course, everybody loved to dance. and in the evenings the children listened mostly while their father read aloud. Early December, and each December, Jane's family turned their old barn into a theater, staging well-known dramas and comedies, Jane's favorites, to entertain their friends and neighbors. Jane loved painting sets, creating costumes, and making stories come to life. There were plenty of stories for her to read, too. Her father's great library boasted 500 books, almost all of them by men. Since Jane had little outside schooling, the library was her classroom. And while Jane devoured everything from history to poetry to biographies, she loved novels best of all. Even as a young girl, Jane was a reader who knew exactly what she liked and precisely what she didn't. So it's no surprise that when Jane was 12, she began to scribble her own keen observations and sharp, wry comments into the margins of books. Jane had such fun writing, she began to pen little plays and stories to make her family laugh out loud. And when her older brothers went away to college and the sea, Jane sent witty letters to keep them smiling far from home. Jane's father believed in her talent. He bought her 3 special notebooks and later a fine mahogany writing box so Jane could carry her work wherever she went. While their brothers journeyed far to make their mark in the world, Jane and Cassandra stayed home. Like other young ladies, they played cards and danced, shopped for lace to trim a bonnet, and gossiped about suitors and marriage. Sometimes Jane even fell a little bit in love herself. All the while, Jane kept reading and listening and, of course, practicing her writing. And when she was just a teen, she felt ready to write novels of her own. Now, the most popular novels in Jane's time were adventures and romances with gallant heroes rescuing fair, fainting heroines from dark, gloomy castles and, of course, despicable, dangerous villains. But Jane wanted her books to hold up a mirror to the ordinary world so readers could recognize and laugh at themselves. So Jane went her own way, inventing a new kind of story about real people and sisters like Cassandra and herself who longed to follow their dreams. And that is exactly what she did. By the time she was 21, Jane had written 3 novels. Jane's proud father sent one to a publisher, which, alas, turned it down. But Jane was a writer who didn't give up. Like an artist using a fine brush, Jane kept working to make her stories better and better, until each word was perfect. At long last, another publisher said yes. During her lifetime, 4 of Jane's 6 major novels were published without her real name, which was sometimes the custom then. The title page simply read, "By a Lady." But everyone was curious to know who this talented lady was, and Jane's secret soon leaked out. Jane didn't mind. She rather liked being known as an author. And so, although Jane died when she was only 41, she lived long enough to achieve her dream. Now, 200 years later, I wonder if Jane would be surprised to learn that her books are still read and loved by people all over the world. Maybe. And then again, maybe not. For perhaps there was a moment when young Jane stood alone in her father's grand library with the works of great men all around her and said to herself, "I can do this. I can do even better. I will write about the ordinary world in the most extraordinary way." That, dear reader, is exactly what she did. The end.
Oh, what a beautiful story. Now I want to go back and read Jane Austen.
Me too.
Yes. Well, in the meantime, here is a beautiful book by Jessica Bagley and Aaron Bagley. It's called Vincent Comes Home. And look, Vincent is a kitty. So here we go. Vincent comes home. Vincent lived on a cargo ship. His paws had never touched land. Ship life was good. Fresh fish whenever he wanted. Seagulls to chase all day long. And the night stars that charted the ship's course were the most beautiful sight he could imagine. Vincent went about as he pleased. No one seemed to notice him much. The Domus carried goods from one port to another. They'd load up with chocolate from Zanzibar and deliver it to Norway. Oranges from Florida ended up in Iceland. Always coming and going, never staying. Vincent loved traveling to exciting new places, each one different from the last. But he could only enjoy them from a distance. The captain collected souvenirs from each port they stopped at and displayed them in his cabin, Vincent's favorite place on the ship. Everyone seemed to have visited every place imaginable. Every place except one. Even though we are far away, it's nice to know that home is always there, said the second mate. I can't wait to get home, said the first mate. The most exotic food in the world can't compare to home-cooked meals, said the cook. Whenever I go home, I never want to leave. Where is this home place, thought Vincent. He didn't know what home was. A place you never want to leave? It sounds wonderful. Better than any place we've visited. I'd like to go to home one day. The next day the ship pulled into another fine city. All hands on deck, prepared to drop anchor. Vincent heard the first mate shout, We're home! The rest of the crew cheered. This is it. We've made it to home, thought Vincent. I can't wait to see it. Home must be the best place in the world. The ship docked, and Vincent raced to the ship's railing and peered over the edge. The city doesn't look so different. Why is home so special? Just then he saw one of the crew walking down the street with his duffel bag. I should follow him. Then I'm sure to see why home is so wonderful, thought Vincent. He followed the crewman for a while until he got to a building. As the crewman opened the door, a bunch of people yelled, Welcome home! Vincent watched as all the people hugged and kissed the crewman. This is home, thought Vincent. I thought home was some amazing new city. He watched through the window for a long time as they ate and laughed and talked together. They all looked so happy. He left and walked around for a long time. He looked in a lot of windows and saw similar sights, and one thing was the same in all the windows. Home isn't just a place, he thought. Home is where the people who love you are. I guess I don't have a home. Vincent padded around and looked up at the quiet night sky. At least the stars would always be there. Just then, he heard a familiar sound. "Huh, there you are, my boy. I've been looking for you all over. You've never left the ship before," said the captain. The captain scooped him up and scratched him under his chin and rubbed his belly. Let's go home. The end.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will say that I do love and admire the writing of Jane Austen.
I do too.
Interestingly enough, another brand new book was written, a picture book about Jane Austen, and it sort of does contrast nicely with the one I just read. So I hope you'll permit me to read this one as well. This is Brave Jane Austen, reader, writer, author, rebel. It's written by Lisa Pliskow and illustrated by Jen Karachi. And here we go. A long time ago, in a tiny village in England, there was a little girl named Jane. There was no reason to think she would grow up to be anything out of the ordinary. She lived with her family in a big old house with low, crooked rafters and a cellar that flooded. For light, they used candles. When the weather was cold, wood was burned in the fireplaces, and when it was hot, there was nothing that could be done about it. It was a good thing Jane's house was big, for there were quite a lot of people in it. She had a papa and a mama, a sister and 6 brothers. There were other boys who lived there too, Papa's students. Papa had a school at home, where he taught the boys and his sons. He looked after the family's farm, and he was the rector. Each Sunday he stood tall in the old gray church, telling everyone about God and his mysterious ways. He used long, complicated words that to Jane were almost like another language, strange and beautiful. Papa worked hard, so did Mama. From dawn to dusk, in and out she went, in charge of the house and the garden, the children, the chickens, the cows, even the bees humming in their hives. And everywhere, it seemed, were boys, large and small, taking up a great deal of space. Where was Jane amidst this bustle and clatter? She watched and listened, thinking, learning, and playing too. For she and the others had a lush green hill to roll down and a barn where they could go on a rainy day. They had lanes to run along, pigs to visit at the farm, a pond to splash in. Inside, in Papa's study, was a globe that spun and a microscope that made large the little wonders of the world, the animalcules, Papa called them. And there were books, not dozens, but hundreds of them, all lined up on the shelves, as if waiting like secrets to be told. In the evenings in the parlor, Papa would read out loud. Here, in this one dim room, into the mind's eye came the brave deeds of kings and queens. Quick flash of sword. There were funny clowns and lovers, tricks and jokes, tears and ballads. Wizards, monsters, fairies, fools, mountains, storm, ships coming across the deep, dark sea, soft beaches and bright stars beyond. As Jane came slowly to understand, even though they were all gathered under the same roof, girls and boys led very different lives. The boys had school and lessons. They climbed trees and hunted and rode horses. Someday they would be gone, off to take their place in the world as sailors, soldiers, lawyers, landowners. But girls learned to sew and mend, to sit up straight and be polite. They were to be good. And Jane saw more. The shadow of poverty that fell had landed upon the family. When she was 7, 2 new boys came, paying students for Papa. They took the room she shared with Cassandra and who was her older sister. The girls were sent to the faraway house of Mrs. Colley, who had a small, inexpensive school of her own. It was so different. It wasn't home. Mrs. Colley's was cold and the town was noisy and dirty. Soon Mrs. Colley took them to another town, which was noisier and dirtier still. There was a terrible sickness, and it caught hold of Jane. It was hard to tell if she would live or die. Mama came hurrying to save Jane and to bring her daughters home. It took many months for Jane to get better. What could she do while everybody was busy? She could read. Letters had become words. Words had become sentences. Paragraphs became pages. Jane could read the books in Papa's study all by herself. So that is what she did. Shakespeare, Johnson, Cowper, Swift, Richardson, Defoe, and more. A dazzling universe opened up to her. Somehow Mama and Papa scraped together enough money to send Jane and Cassandra to school again. This time it was the Abbey School for Young Ladies, where the pupils were taught a bit of spelling, penmanship, and French. They had some lessons in music and dancing. These were the things a girl should know: to be ladylike, to be a good wife, and in Jane's world, getting married was the only thing a girl could hope for when she grew up. A girl who didn't marry was odd, a failure, maybe even both. There was Jane, 9 years old, far from home, at the Abbey School, where girls whose families had more money and were thought to be better, more important than Jane's. These girls could look forward to glittering balls and beautiful gowns. They could dream of weddings and happily ever after. Jane watched, listened, and thought. When Jane was 10, she and Cassandra came home. There was no more money for school. Jane kept on reading. That was her school. But now it wasn't enough to simply read. She came from a writing family. Papa with his sermons, Mama with her funny poems, older brothers who wrote and shared in the evenings to applause and laughter. Jane decided to try it too. What would she write? Her head was filled with bits and pieces of everything she had been reading. Perhaps she could start by rearranging what she already had. Jane's imagination soared like a wild bird. Her writing wasn't the least bit ladylike, but it was funny and clever. Her family laughed and clapped and laughed again. She wrote and wrote, getting better all the time. One day, Jane met a handsome, intelligent young man. His name was Tom. Like Jane, he loved to laugh and dance. Jane liked him. He liked Jane. But they were both poor, and quickly, Tom's family had him sent away. Many girls Jane's age had already married, had homes of their own and children to care for, but not Jane. Tom was gone, and Jane was the girl who wrote. She wrote a longer story. It was different from anything she'd written before. The heroine of First Impressions was a smart young lady named Elizabeth. She loved to laugh and dance and came from a family that didn't have much money. One day she met a handsome, rich young man, Mr. Darcy. Some of his relatives and friends didn't approve of Elizabeth, but she proudly stood up for herself, and in the end, Mr. Darcy, who feared he would lose Elizabeth forever, married her. They were to live happily ever after. Jane's family loved First Impressions. They loved it so much that Papa even sent a letter to a publisher in far-off London. "Should you give any encouragement," he wrote, "I will send you the work." It would be unladylike to publish a book, for that was something that mostly men did. But if it happened, Jane could know for sure she was a real writer and she could earn money of her own. The publisher said no. But what did Jane do then? Life went on. She read and sewed, planned menus for her family. She took long walks. She played piano. She went to parties and visited relatives. She helped take care of her parents. She helped take care of her nieces and nephews. And in between all this, she kept on writing her funny, thoughtful stories. When Jane was 26, a young man named Harris asked her to marry him. Harris was so different from Tom of long ago, but if she said yes, she could be like other women, and she would never have to worry about money again. She could live in a grand house, wear beautiful gowns, eat the most expensive foods. Jane did say yes. But the very next day, she told Harris that she had changed her mind. Years later, she would write, "Anything is to be preferred or endured rather than marrying without affection." Hard times followed. Papa died. Dear Papa, who with his steadfast love had encouraged Jane all her life. Now it was just Mama and Cassandra and Jane on their own. They moved and moved again, always scrimping and contriving. Jane had worked hard on her stories, but nobody, it seemed, wanted to publish them. Then came the news that one of Jane's brothers had a house where they could live. Mama, Cassandra, and Jane settled down once more. And something wonderful happened. Jane's story about two sisters called Sense and Sensibility was published. At last, she was an author with a book filled with her words that she could hold in her hands, turn its pages, place on a shelf. Soon Jane's story, First Impressions, now called Pride and Prejudice, was also published. When she received her first copy in the mail, she wrote joyfully to her sister, "I have got my own darling child from London." People liked these books so much. The publishers had to print more copies. Jane was earning money. Two more of her stories were published, Mansfield Park and Emma. All over England, people were buying, reading, and enjoying her books. Even the Prince Regent loved them. He had his own library and go to see Jane, and she was invited to visit the palace. It was like spring had finally arrived after a long, dark winter. Jane's dream of being a writer and an author had come true. She had more stories she wanted to tell, other books she wanted to share. A tale about a girl who liked ghosts and mysterious castles, and another story more serious about a lady, not so young anymore, who thought she had lost the love of her life. Jane kept writing, but she began to feel unwell. As the months went by, her health worsened. The doctors could do nothing to help her. When she was 41 years old, Jane died, held close in the arms of her sister Cassandra. The two books, Northanger Abbey and Persuasion, were published later that year. Who would have thought when Jane was a little girl scribbling away in a tiny village that one day the Prince Regent would admire her, would respect her talent? And who would have thought that 200 years later Jane would be one of the most beloved writers in the world? Today, Jane's books can be found in just about every country, in many languages, on shelves, on screens, and in people's hearts. Her words and ideas and laughter are everywhere. The end.
Oh, beautiful.
I like that. It just tells a little bit more, a little more details. into her.
Exactly. I like that too. Well, I have a book about an imaginary, about a rock named Petra by Mariana Copo. Petra. Nothing can move me. Not the wind. Not time. I don't go anywhere. Everyone comes to me. I am strong. I am a fearsome, fearless, mighty, magnificent mountain. Huh? Huh. Is that a pebble? Woof. Me? A pebble? No way. I am an egg, a smooth and shiny egg. I'm not any ordinary egg. I am an egg of the world, in a world of possibility. Will I breathe fire? Will I wear a tuxedo? Whatever I become, I'm bound to be amazing. There's no room for rocks in my nest. Oh no, not again. This is becoming a pattern. Well, they say no egg is an island. But what an amazing island I am. What paradise, what palm trees, what peace, what sunshine, what a cool rock. Not bad at all. What will I be tomorrow? Who knows? Well, no need to worry. I'm a rock and this is how I roll. The end.
I did enjoy that.
Yes.
Now, here's a book that is, actually the words are a poem. And the poem is by Holly Grant, and the book is by K.G. Campbell. And it is just the kind of a book that I think myself and my cousins, as we grew up, this is the kind of book that we would have read over and over because it's beautiful and mysterious. And I love the illustrations. Wee Sister Strange. They say there's a girl who lives by the woods in a crooked old house with no garden but gloom. She doesn't have parents. No one knows her name, but the people in town call her Wee Sister Strange. She climbs from her window as the shadows grow long and runs into the woods where no children dare roam. She drinks up the moon like a cat drinking cream. She drinks up the dark like it's tea with the queen. She talks to the owls who hoot and in moans. When they finish their dinner, she buries the bones. And she charms a fierce bear while she rides on its back through the groves golden leafed under sky inky black. When the wind starts to wither and the trees stir and groan, up Sister climbs while wolves prowl below. She looks far and wide over forest and marsh. She looks wide and far from her high spiky perch. She peels back the clouds. What is it she seeks? She peers at the stars as through keyholes one peeks. She dives into the bog, and she swims oh so deep, and she walks on the slime where the bog creatures creep. She's searching for something. She's searching, I'm sure. She inspects every snail as a mermaid counts pearls. But her hunt leaves her stumped amidst bramble and thistle, till one eve on her wanders she spies the bright twinkle of a snug little house with one window aglow. Creeping up to the pane, she peeps on tippy-toe. And there's you in your bed with this book 'neath your nose. She crooks her ear close and she hears a soft voice. They say there's a girl who lives by the woods in a crooked old house with no garden but gloom. She's found it at last in your room golden glowing. She's found it at last, a wee bedtime story. Her ears gobble the rhymes. They sop up the poem crumbs as the lullaby lulls. Sister sighs and she yawns. She snuggles beneath quilts of moonlight and leaves, her eyes shutter shut. She's starting to dream. Beautiful book, beautiful.
Beautiful book. Ooh, I like that so well. This book is about a unicorn. It's called Thelma the Unicorn, and it's by Alan Labby. Here we go. Thelma the Unicorn. And look, here's some carrots. Thelma felt a little sad. In fact, she felt forlorn. You see, she wished with all her heart to be a unicorn. Her best friend's name was Otis. He liked her quite a lot. He said, "You're perfect as you are." But Thelma said, "I'm not." And that was when she saw a carrot on the ground. It gave her such a great idea, she squealed and jumped around. She took that simple carrot and she tied it to her nose. "I'll say that I'm a unicorn. It might just work. Who knows?" Well, as she did, a truck drove by. The driver rubbed his eyes. "Good grief! Is that a unicorn?" he shrieked in great surprise. As Thelma watched the swerving truck, it very nearly hit her. Would you believe that truck was filled with nice pink paint and glitter? Oh, Thelma looked amazing. She was a unicorn. "I'm special now," she cried out loud. And so a star was born. All across the whole wide world, her fans would cheer her name. Thelma loved it every bit. The fame, the fame, the fame. Thelma was a superstar. Her dreams had all come true. But soon she found that so much fame was kind of tricky, too. You see, her fans were mad for her. They'd scream and cry and laugh. They'd chase her everywhere she went to get an autograph. In fact, they'd chase her all day long. It never, ever stopped. They chased her while she exercised. They chased her while she shopped. "Please don't chase me anymore," she asked the screaming crowd. "We'll chase you all we want," they said. "We're fans, so it's allowed." And some were not her fans at all. No, some were really mean. And some just did the meanest things she'd really ever seen. Look, they're holding signs. "I don't like unicorns. I agree." So one dark night she felt quite sad, this famous little pony. And she said, I thought that I'd feel great, but all I feel is lonely. And so with that, she changed her mind. This lonely unicorn, she cleaned off all her sparkle, and she ditched her magic horn. And then she walked right past the crowd. They didn't even notice. She thought how nice that it would be to see her lovely Otis. And when he asked about her trip beneath their favorite tree, she simply said, "Oh, it was fun, but I'd rather just be me." The end.
Well, it is springtime.
Yes.
And here's a lovely picture book. It is a first science storybook entitled Bird Builds a Nest, written by Martin Jenkins and illustrated by Richard Jones. I like it. Mother and father bird. And here is the mother bird in her nest. It's a beautiful day. Bird is up early. She's got a lot to do. First, she needs some breakfast. What she wants is a nice, juicy worm. A very big worm. Bird pulls hard, but the worm pulls back. It is a big worm, and it's strong. Too strong for Bird. And this is better. It's smaller and not as strong, and it's delicious. Now Bird can get on with her work. She's not looking for worms now. She needs twigs, lots of twigs. This one's too heavy, and so is this one. All of these will do fine. Bird can carry one large twig, or 2 medium-sized twigs, or 3 or 4 small twigs, although it's hard to fit that many in her beak at once. She's building her nest. It's not quite finished, though. Carefully, she pushes a twig into the side of the nest and pulls its end back out. Pushing and pulling, she gets all the twigs in place. She works for hours, fetching and carrying, flying back and forth, pushing and pulling. Sometimes she drops a twig, but it doesn't matter. She's looking for softer things now. Dried grass and feathers. They're very light. She can carry lots of those at once. She tucks them into place, turning around and around, pushing with her whole body. She makes a snug little cup, smooth and soft on the inside. The nest is ready and waiting. Can you guess what it's waiting for? Eggs! 5 of them, speckled and beautiful, getting ready to hatch. Happy birds and happy spring. The end.
Oh, very nice. Well, this book is a good one too. It's called The Better Tree Fort. It's by Jessica Scott Caron, and it is illustrated by Keen Lang also, who also wrote one or illustrated one of the Jane Austen books. Here we go. The Better Tree Fort. Russell's new house was better than his last one because of the giant maple tree in the backyard. It had great big limbs and a trunk so wide even Russell's dad could not wrap his arms around it. Russell said to his dad, "Let's build a tree fort." Russell's dad said, "I don't know much about building." He looked up, up, up. "Or tree forts," he added. Russell said, "I'll draw you a plan." "What's this?" Russell's dad asked. "A balcony to watch from? And this? A slide for quick escape. And this? A skylight to see the stars. And this? A basket to haul up our sleeping bags and binoculars and my big book of birds." "Let's go to the lumber store," Russell's dad said. They roamed up and down the aisles. Russell's dad looked lost until a man in an apron came to help. Russell showed him the plan. The man in the apron sold them tools and lumber and, When they got home, they spread everything out in the backyard like an enormous puzzle. Russell nailed his plan to the fence near the maple tree. Russell's dad took a long time to get started. He measured things over and over again, and then there were 4 more trips to the lumber store. But slowly the tree fort started to take shape. First the floor, then the walls with the cutout windows. The roof was particularly tricky. When his dad was done, Russell painted the trap door robin's egg blue. "It's perfect," Russell said, breathing in the sweet smell of fresh-cut wood. "But there's no skylight or balcony," Russell's dad admitted. "Or escape slide," he added. "It's perfect," Russell repeated. They ate peanut butter and jam sandwiches for dinner in the tree fort and slept up top in their sleeping bags as the night sky filled with glittering stars. They even thought they might have heard an owl. The next morning, as Russell was spotting birds from his tree fort, he heard a hammer and a table saw. A construction crew in hard hats was building something in the backyard 3 houses over. Russell watched all day from his tree fort. What were they building? He gasped. They were building a tree fort. Only this tree fort was bigger and straighter. It had a slide for quick escape and turrets like a castle. It even had real working lights. The construction crew tested them. On, off, on, off, on, off. When the tree fort was done, a boy the same size as Russell came into the backyard. He nodded at the foreman and then climbed up into the tree fort. The construction crew packed their tools in a van and drove off. Russell scrambled down his rope ladder and over to the backyard 3 houses away. He stood at the bottom of the better tree fort. It was so large it blocked the sun. "Hello," Russell called. The boy Russell's size stepped onto the balcony and peered down at him. Russell said, "I'm Russell." He pointed over his shoulder. "That's my tree fort." "I'm Warren," the boy said. "Come on up." Russell climbed the spiral stairs and looked around astonished. There was a radio plugged into an electrical outlet. There was a rug on the floor and shelves filled with dishes. There were bunk beds with pillows. There was even a skylight. Warren turned down the music. "Would you like something to drink?" he asked. "I have apple juice." Russell said, "Yes, please." He added, "You have a very nice tree fort." Warren said, "My dad ordered the plans." Russell finished his juice. He had been taught to rinse his dishes when he was done, and because this tree fort had everything, Russell asked, "Where's your kitchen sink?" "A kitchen sink with running water up here?" Warren scoffed. Russell shrugged. He said, "I'm sure that somewhere there's a tree fort with a kitchen sink." "You're right," Warren said with a frown. "There probably is." Russell asked, "Do you want to see my tree fort sometime?" Warren nodded, but he was still thinking about the better tree fort with a kitchen sink. When Russell got home, his dad was cutting the lawn. He waved as Russell climbed his rope ladder. When Russell reached the top, he waved back from his trapdoor. He watched his dad mow. When his dad was done gardening, he joined Russell up top. They looked out of the window at the tree fort 3 houses over. Russell's dad said, "There will always be a better tree fort." Russell smiled and then he said, "But not a better dad." The end.
I love that.
I do too.
This is a fairly short book. We might be able to read one more. What do you think?
Sounds good.
All right. Henny, Penny, Lenny, Denny, and Mike by Cynthia Rylant and by Mike Austin, the illustrator. Henny, Penny, Lenny, Denny, and Mike are 5 fish who met at the fish store. They are fab friends. A little girl brought them home and plopped them into the tank. Plop, 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 plop. Fab! fish tank is like heaven. Henny loves the orange gravel. Penny loves the diver. Lenny loves the rock. Denny loves the pirate ship, and Mike loves the bubbles. Nobody loves the snail, but that's okay. This is fish tank life. Swim, swim, swim. Gulp, gulp, gulp. Henny, Penny, Lenny, and Denny and Mike think that being a fish is so fab. They suck kisses to the little girl every day. There's only one day when fish tank life is not so fab. It is clean the fish tank day. They are unceremoniously plopped into a bowl. Then the little girl makes the orange gravel, the diver, the pirate ship, the rock, and the whole big fish tank just sparkle. Wow! Everything is crisp. The diver is impeccable. The ship is ship-shape, but alas, the snail is still ignored. Can fish tank life be any more perfect than this? Why, yes, because plop. Well, hello, clownfish. The clownfish is such a clown, he starts telling joke after joke, and Henny, Penny, Lenny, Denny, and Mike laugh so hard, their bubbles fizz up the whole tank. But wait, there's more. Plop. An angelfish. Henny, Penny, Lenny, Denny, and Mike stop yucking it up, and they just stare. She is so beautiful. But wait, there's more. Glunk. It's a fairy castle. Henny, Penny, Lenny, Denny, and Mike forget all about clowns and angels. They are all about the fairy castle. It is enchanting. It is ornamental. It is exotic. It is a trap! Help! Lenny is stuck. Oh no, say Henny, Penny, Denny, and Mike. What to do? The clownfish tries to lighten the mood with a joke. Yet nothing unsticks Lenny. But wait. What's this? The snail? It is a snail! A snail on a mission! The quick-thinking snail who everyone had ignored slides right up to Lenny and with one fell suck, pop! Lenny is unstuck. The tank explodes into cheers. Henny, Penny, Lenny, Denny, and Mike smack kisses all over the snail. The clownfish yucks it up. The angelfish sings hallelujah, and fish tank life returns to what it always was. So fab. The end.
Oh, that is a good story. Well, I think we have time for one more. This is called Who Wants a Tortoise? It's by David Keane and illustrated by K.G. Campbell. Who wants a tortoise? I've been waiting my whole life to get a puppy. A rascally guy with a waggly tail. I make lists of cute dog names. I read about training puppies. I dream of all the adventures I'll have with my trusty dog at my side. A puppy is the only thing I want for my birthday, but the present with the holes in top doesn't have a puppy in it. What is that? Whispers Sasha. She has a golden retriever. Is it dead? Asked Emily. She has a Dalmatian. It's a tortoise, said Eric, who's an expert on gross stuff. That's a reptile. It has cold blood. He has a wiener dog. A tortoise, I croak. Who wants a tortoise? I don't cry until I open Sasha's present. After everyone leaves, Daddy says he's told me 1,000,000 times that he's allergic to dogs. Did you ever think I might be allergic to a dumb tortoise? I shout. You never get timeouts because of a dog. I don't have a list of cute tortoise names, so I don't name him anything. Hey, you tortoise. He doesn't seem to mind, but it's impossible to tell what a tortoise is thinking. I decide to see what my new lump of a pet can do. Fetch! Fetch, boy, fetch! Turns out, tortoises won't fetch anything. They also do not like rolling over, but when it comes to playing dead, my tortoise is an expert. Unlike dogs, tortoises will not lick your face. Give me a kiss. Or beg for bologna. Who wants a treat? Come on, boy, jump. I'm home, and they do not get excited when you come through the door. At least a tortoise doesn't squirm when you play makeover. I do his nails with sparkling raspberry delight. You shouldn't use a glue stick on such a majestic creature, but he looks like a princess. Mommy and I both make our mad faces for the rest of the day. I think my tortoise is mad too, but it's still impossible to tell what he's thinking. Grammy and Grandpa come for a visit and bring me a birthday book, a tortoise book. Tortoises have been around since the dinosaurs. Whoa, that's even older than you. My book says a tortoise like mine was the first reptile to go into space, so I make my tortoise a spacesuit. He actually looks kind of brave. If a tortoise can fly into space, going for a walk should be easy, but there's no place for the leash. Nothing a little duct tape can't fix. Turns out tortoises are actually pretty good at some things. When Sasha and I have a lemonade stand, we also sell chances to hold a real live tortoise. We sell more tortoise than lemonade. Eric and I set up a racetrack. My guy wins by a mile. On sharing day at school, my tortoise poops on Brendan's desk, which is totally great. Dumb turtle, he says. How dare you, I say. Tortoises hate being called turtles. Besides, everyone knows that turtles live in water and tortoises live on land. They do, he says. I discover there's one thing tortoises are too good at: hide and seek. After 20 minutes, we start to panic. How can a tortoise run away? He may be slow, but he's very steady. Do tortoises even have ears? Yes, he can hear, but he doesn't listen. Here, tortoise, 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 we shout a billion times, but a tortoise almost never comes when you call. We knock on everyone's door. He looks like a rock, but with long, sparkly pink toenails. We hang 50 signs and offer our lemonade money for a reward. Maybe he dug underground and he'll hibernate till spring. What's he thinking? He'll miss Christmas and everything. When it gets dark out, I set a plate of butter lettuce, which is like chocolate chip cookies, to a tortoise, and I leave the porch light on just in case. Days go by. I put fresh butter lettuce out every night. I can't sleep with my poor little tortoise out in the big world all by himself, with only his shell to protect him. He's never made noise, but the house seems so quiet without him. A week later, Mommy happens to mention that Mrs. Gilbert down the street thinks a rabbit is nibbling her turnips and cabbages. I'm out the door so fast I forgot to swallow my spaghetti. You naughty little tortoise, I shout. Don't worry, I tell Mrs. Gilbert, this rascally guy with the waggly tail belongs to me. Somebody is extra shy about all the attention in his welcome home parade. We celebrate by painting our toenails sparkling raspberry delight. And before I fall asleep, I remember my favorite name on the list of cute dog names. It's perfect. Good night, Rover, I say into the darkness. Then I dream of all the adventures I'll have with my trusty tortoise at my side. The end.
Yay.
And we are done, and come to the library. We'll see you later. Goodbye.